Guys, I'm very excited to talk to you because, as we know, fashion designs really only for one size and one body type. And this is something that Sine has known and felt ever since childhood, and also started researching and actively changing ever since her studies at the Royal College of Art. Now, what would our industry look like if the design process incorporated the body rather than rejecting it? According to Sinead, very hot and very exciting. Now, Sinead, you recently told me something that I thought was fascinating, a really interesting insight into your design process. The fashion industry invented thinness culture for efficiency and profitability. Could you explain what you meant by that?
Yeah, so I think, obviously, doing research and design development for inclusive sizing and then producing that really highlighted essentially what I've come to the conclusion of, which is that the lack of product development for inclusive sizing is, of course, just due to profit. I suppose as an example, majority of luxury fashion companies will do design development for runway sizing and then develop that in, say, a size 8. And then that's graded up to maybe a size 14. And if you want to go further than a size 14, you need to have multiple more sample sizes along the way. And of course, that's more expensive. So, for instance, I generally think that if you want to do size 6 to 30, you need to have minimum 5 sample sizes per style. So logically, that's if you're going to do 2, 3, 4, 5 more sample sizes than one, then it's 2, 3, 4, 5 times more expensive. So I kind of realized that ultimately a lot of what the industry was doing was just creating a community and a branding tactic that would make people change as opposed to actually spending more money as companies themselves. And obviously fashion is such a beautiful industry in terms of like craft and desirability, and so it's very easy to entice people to want to be part of that. And actually physically change themselves in order to do so. And that's been like a really something that I think a lot of young designers right now are grappling with, the mental health effects of well, essentially this commercial strategy.
Yeah. Yes, so what we see is that brands expect consumers to fit the clothes rather than the other way around.
Yeah, definitely.
If I can ask something that is a bit provocative, purposely, I'm a size 38. I fit most clothes. Why should I care?
Well, aside from like what I hope is universally that like inclusive product development is ethical and it's just important for that reason. But regardless of whether you care about that, I think like in terms of newness and modernity and innovation, the most important idea right now in garment development, I think, is that the body is the beginning point of the development of styles, and that it's not an afterthought, So I suppose traditionally, even like studying my BA, I remember very clearly that we had to always have like someone in mind, a customer, and that customer would be very well developed, what they looked like, what they liked to do, but their body was never part of it. It was only a face. And then, of course, it was a given that the body would be just this sort of like tall, thin fashion illustration situation, which is just incredibly strange if you're developing this whole character, but the body is not even part of the design process. And that's completely the opposite of how I work. For me, the body is completely intertwined from the beginning of research, not even product development, who I'm designing for and the body they have. It's all one package, and it's incredibly important, I think, for making exciting new work, and also more sustainable work, better fitting work, more interesting shapes, even just like in a pattern cutting nerd way, like if you only were pattern cutting for size 8 for like 20 years and now you get to pattern cut for 6 to 30, that's just so much more scope for design solutions and like shape and form and thinking about support and thinking about movement and how different bodies move. And it's just very exciting and feels so much more modern than this idea that the body is almost separate from the head.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that there's so much design innovation still waiting to be discovered, and the fashion industry is not looking at it.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're taking those principles into practice, can you give a concrete example of what that looks like?
Yeah, so I think like a lot of my work started with a lot of research and conversations with people in my life and their relationship with clothing, and not necessarily people who were interested in fashion, or though of course everyone wears clothes, so it's kind of interesting how fashion has managed to isolate so many people through being so exclusionary. So for instance, I had this very specific memory of my sister when I was about 11, and she had a really big chest and I didn't, and she was always looking to wear like menswear shirting, but she just felt that she looked like, she used to say like, I look so matronly and you look edgy, but I'm 11. And I don't know whether it stuck with me because I thought it was a really odd thing to say, but later on during my MA I was like thinking about these moments, things like that were said to me, and so I started with shirting actually, because I started analyzing sort of the shapes and types of garments that people with fat or breasts or softness get to wear. And so like I think a shirt is an interesting beginning point. So I became like obsessed with like solving this issue with my sister in mind initially, and actually now she wears all the shirts, so it's been successful. But so like trying to give shape at the side and the center of the chest. I felt like most bodies above a size 14 were kind of generally categorized into like either having to be like very fitted or like vampy, kind of form-fitting, sexy, or like quite oversized or like compressed. And then there was a lot of like interesting garments that were never available within the luxury sector for different sorts of bodies. So yeah, the shirt has become like a real focus for me. So we always have like an internal band, which is adjustable so that you can get like a fitted section while still having like a more oversized line. Yeah.
I find this so fascinating how we're all working in an industry that largely focuses on women, and yet we don't know what to do with boobs. And we just flatten them out. Now you understand the purpose of this dress and see it as a 2D element. And it's really, really exciting to see what happens if we fully incorporate these different body types.
Yeah.
The dress I'm wearing reminds me of another interesting point of yours, is the relationship of the designer to the wearer. You already touched upon it a little bit, but could you expand on how you would like to change this relationship, how you see it?
Yeah, I think like definitely also through my own journey, realizing how polarizing the process of trying garments on and them not fitting or feeling uncomfortable in specific ways has made me really passionate about like trying to change some of those experiences. So I think in general my brand, even for size 6, like the smallest size we do is 4/6, depending on the garment style. It's always for like a softer body, so a size 6, still a fuller chest, softer thighs. So like there'll always be a more generous rise in the trousers. It's just about those small, like the armholes are all a little bit more generous, the arm width as well. So I think that's, and what I've noticed is that doesn't hurt the people who are maybe have less fat on their arms or thighs. It still all fits well. It just makes it more inclusive just to have the armhole a bit bigger, and the way the inner thigh is cut as well is very important. Yeah, so that's probably.
Yeah, this is fascinating because you're not just designing for multiple sizes. It's also about incorporating body types. You mentioned that you don't really believe in one-size-fits-all or a unisex approach as a total solution for body inclusivity. Could you explain why?
Yeah, I mean, one size fit all doesn't work, obviously, unless it's specific stretch or knit garments sometimes, or like plissé in some ways. But in terms of like a woven fabric with no stretch, ultimately, definitely doesn't work. Aside for if you incorporate adjustable elements. But yeah, how many can you incorporate? What's the beginning of the question?
Yes, I really want you to talk about the ways in which the irregularities that exist within the human body, and that a size 42 isn't simply a size 36 plus centimeters.
Yeah, I suppose most people will either have experienced this themselves or like had a friend or family member experience the process of like buying a garment, and the grading. Grading is the process by which you incrementally enlarge the garment to create different sizes. And how the grading is strange, like for instance, mini skirts in size 20 often from certain, especially like low quality fast fashion brands, will just be like weirdly wide and very short. So like things like that happen in the design process when design attention is not given to equally developing each sample size, because as each body gains fat, they gain it in different places, and it's not like some sort of equal distribution everywhere. And so also as a brand, you're not just choosing who my customer is at size 8, you're also choosing who's my customer at each of my sample size points. So if my sample sizes were 10, 16, 20, 24, and 28, I have to, per style, think about, okay, is it someone who's got more fat in the stomach or more fat in the back, or like where is that distribution? And then I do develop the garment based on a specific type of body as well. And so it does create a much more interesting collection, I think, because I'm trying to think of different types of bodies per different styles. So you may not suit a particular shirt in the line, but you might fit another one. Yeah, I think that is a much more innovative way of creating larger collections as opposed to creating, tons of styles for just one body shape.
Mm-hmm. So you work with size inclusivity, but that doesn't mean your brand needs to be for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Like there needs to be obviously many more brands doing inclusive sizing, because in that way there'll be many more different types of body types catered for across a range of brands. I definitely don't imagine that I could create clothing for everyone, not just in terms of sizing, but also aesthetically, and that's why it's important that there are more brands doing a larger range.
Mm-hmm. So you've done this design development and research. You have your collection. What's the experience like bringing that collection into the industry?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really interesting. I've been thinking a lot about this as I do production and as buyers start to buy larger and larger sizes and they start to buy more of each style, which is amazing. I've been thinking how, every time there's a new innovation that everyone needs to invest and not expect profit initially. Yeah, exactly. So it's been amazing to see how like the factory owners are also investing. Like for instance, if they have to hand cut several size 20 tops because I've only got one in every style ordered, they're not charging me extra right now. So that's amazing, even though that's a lot more work. The buyers are also, they need to expect that maybe because they haven't invested in that customer before, that maybe that particular size won't sell out just yet, because it's going to take a long time to gain the trust of a new set of customers who've not been able to purchase luxury before. So yeah, that's been kind of an interesting takeaway. And also, of course, like media, like the investment media makes into profiling what I'm trying to do, because they believe in like the overall vision. Just so it's so. I've had so much support from so many people who are investing. Yeah, because I suppose believe in what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in order to design in the innovative way that you're bringing, the whole system will have to collectively, holistically adapt and really break through those old, in my opinion, very boring paradigms.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I believe it's everyone's responsibility, but it's regardless, as I said before, whether or not you're interested in sort of like the moral or ethical side of it, it's just like an exciting way forward for the industry because it's also more sustainable. It creates more clothing that's going to last for longer because the garments are adaptable and more generous and designed for more bodies in mind, so they can be handed down easier. It's just overall a better design model. Also to design for changing bodies, because we all know our bodies are going to change over our lifetime, and the mental health impact of trying to halt that change and contain ourselves. And yeah, it's just is extremely bad for the quality of life to try and, it's so human to
Reduce
change.
yourself.
Yeah.
Diversity and inclusivity have been receiving more and more attention within the fashion industry. Within this conversation, when it comes to size inclusivity, what do you feel the industry still gets wrong? What are some approaches, narratives that you would like to see changed?
Say that again.
Perhaps in relationship to your work, what is something that media often gets wrong or fails to see about what you do?
Yeah, I think one thing that I tried to sort of like look at a little bit with my last show, which was more of a conversation about what we're trying to do, was kind of to do with this. I felt like obviously we were getting such incredible press, and that was for the 2 runway shows we did during London Fashion Week. And a lot of the press was focused on casting, which is super important to us. And I just wanted the opportunity to discuss how, obviously, complicated the process of like doing a runway show with so many sizes, and also like the casting process is. So yeah, I think that's my answer.
Perhaps you can expand on this a little bit, how even the runway show in itself, in the way it's structured and organizes, makes it nearly impossible for size inclusivity to exist.
Yeah, I think like, of course, before every show, there's a big tailoring process, even if all the models are roughly size 4 or 6. There's so many alterations because everyone's body at every size is very different. So even within the parameter of those measurements and height restrictions, or there's still so many alterations. So you can imagine when there's like 4 different sample sizes, and within each sample size there's like 6 different body types, that the alterations are even more significant. So it definitely means that we pre-cast, we cast a lot earlier. We do a lot of, particular people we would definitely want to cast, we'll do made to measure like 2 months in advance. We'll start working with them, which limits. So then we're definitely working with those particular models in London because we need to know they'll definitely be there. But obviously, like a lot of the industry is built around like the spontaneity of like models coming in for Fashion Week and like last minute doing the casting, and then that was so difficult because the scope of the alterations were so vast. And like I'm there at the beginning of every season, like let's see, I wonder how many models we're going to cast with like, I don't know, like a 121 centimeter hip and an E cup with a 40-inch band. Like I'm just like, I don't know. So I'm kind of like trying to roughly, I plan now the collections into 4 sections, 4 different size groups. And then, of course, that leads to maybe the styling being less spontaneous, because if I can only style within each size section, and that's, so we're trying to also do styling earlier so that I can remake certain things if we want to do that look in that size. Because, of course, I also enjoy the creativity of that styling process. It's just, I think we just need more time. Yeah.
What this reveals to me is just, again, the interchangeability of the body within the old system. So at Fashion Week, these masses of young girls that are imported is a very strong word, but that arrive in these capital cities, often no name, no identity, because they're not given one, whereas you're really giving a lot of agency to your models and including them closely in the creative process.
Yeah, I mean, that's central to everything we're doing. I mean, that's the most exciting thing about, that's why I wanted to do fashion, actually. I was excited and inspired by the connection of like the craftsmanship with the physical body and emotions and like being human, and then to like exclude the body from that is just, it just became like impossible for me. So yeah, it's the beginning point is like, whose shape am I working with, and yeah, what might they want to wear. I also have, you know, a lot of conversations with my fit models about things they never get to wear, what they'd like to try, like just, yeah, it's, and I mean, I think another thing I want to highlight as well, which I think is why it's so important to start all of this in the research and development phase, is because I think we all know that, you know, there's actually no time once the collection's finished. There's no like magical person who's going to like completely redevelop all the styles to be inclusive for a broader size range. It has to be included in the research and development, and it kind of has to be in the show or in some format in order for me to offer it on the line sheet. Like, I offer size 6 to 30, but not for every style. If we didn't develop something to 30, we only did to 24, then I'm aware that it needs to be done properly, and there needs to be the time. And there won't be the money from wholesale. There's the way the wholesale market is built right now. It isn't built in the margin to have more space for more sample sizes to be developed after. I feel like even when you have a larger product development team in a much larger company, everyone is still struggling with timing and deadlines and delivery. I don't think. Yeah, so that's why it's super important for me to make sure that I know that every time I choose to do a certain size for a certain style, that's going to be a very important size for me that season. I think before I was a bit more naive and I thought, oh, I'll do it this size, and then later on I'll think about if I want to remake it for, you know, Sarah or whatever. And then like, it just won't happen, you know. So then I try and be much more intentional and make sure that I'm hitting all of the shapes and sizes that I want to within development in every technique I want to do, so that when it comes to the show/production, I've already got the base of any shape I might want to do for the specific sizes.
It appears to me that your biggest challenge really is the speed of the calendar system, and the way our industry rushes towards the next thing. As a final question, I would like to ask you, within this rushed system, what do you need most in order to do the incredible work that you do? How can people support you? Funding.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, as I said before about investment, I think the most important thing that the industry needs to realize that this is like a major piece of innovation, increasing the possibility for the industry to do more inclusive product development, and there needs to be funding and potentially a slight change in the structure of the wholesale model. Yeah, just a lot more money.
Exactly. So if anyone wants to come and find me and Sinead and complain about the way boobs are treated in this industry, etc., and talk about how we can change it, come find us and have a lovely day.